You may be seated. Thank you. Further evidence on behalf of the defendant.
Thank you, Your Honor. The defense calls Sean Harrington.
You are Mr. Harrington. I can get you to raise your right hand for me, please. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please be seated.
Check what I do.
Sounds like you're a bit soft-spoken. I'm going to ask you to sit right up to that microphone, please. Speak right into it and start out by stating your full name. Spell your last name, please.
Sean L. Harrington, Harrington.
You started out well. You kind of faded off at the end, so stay up to that mic, please. Counsel.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Harrington, tell the jury what you do for a living.
I have several occupations. I'm a law professor, I'm an attorney, I'm a cybersecurity engineer, and I'm a computer forensics examiner or a digital forensics examiner.
As a digital forensics examiner, what does that mean?
It is the discipline of analyzing digital data. Originally started out many years ago as being simply referred to as computer forensics, and then when mobile devices, cell phones and so forth became prevalent, the new term digital forensics sort of took over the industry. So digital forensics, we know the word forensics means looking at historical records, historical data for introduction into court or into evidence. So it's the analysis and interpretation of digital data in the past tense for presentation into evidence.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness to make sure the microphone is turned on?
The mic is on, and I'm about, I think, about an inch or inch and a half away from it.
You need to stay right up that close, please.
Okay, yeah.
And this digital forensic data, what do you do with it in your line of work?
Well, the line of work I'm in is quite broad, so it's everything from analyzing Facebook evidence, resolving electronic discovery disputes in court, looking at metadata of documents and records, analyzing hard drives of servers and workstations and laptops and that sort of thing, and analyzing mobile devices. It also includes, to some extent, medical devices, Internet of Things type devices, GPS devices inside of automobiles, and anything that can store data. So it could be a Sony PlayStation, anything that's capable of storing data that can be subsequently retrieved.
And what's the end goal of looking at this data?
Well, there are several objectives. One of them can be to help a company develop information security policies. It could be to help find vulnerabilities in devices such as, for example, medical devices. It can be finding vulnerabilities in a network. It can be collecting evidence to find out what happened in the past, some sort of a employee separation dispute or a sexual harassment dispute or a child pornography investigation where we're trying to ascertain how certain files were acquired and downloaded. So there's a wide range of investigatory goals, or in some cases, as I mentioned, preventive goals.
Okay. And have you worked with cell tower data in your line of work?
I have. I've worked in a number of cases involving interpreting call detail records and historical cell tower information, yes.
Can you tell the jury what that entails in your line of work?
Sure. So it's, I want to say it's having increasing relevance for some reason. I didn't really see a lot of these cases several years ago, but in the last couple of years, I think it's because of the privacy capabilities that Apple and other companies have made available on phones to protect people's whereabouts and what they've been doing, and the concerns about that. A lot of that's been in the media, so Apple and others have sort of tried to close those vulnerabilities. Google was one that was in the news recently. So as a result of that, it's becoming more and more difficult for law enforcement to recover data from mobile devices. You might recall the San Bernardino terrorism case was one prime example of that. So law enforcement, in my experience recently, has been relying more and more on cell tower information, which regrettably is less accurate than GPS type information that can be found on a phone, but it is still a valuable source of information. information, and it's coming up more and more cases recently over the last, I want to say, 3-4 years.
Okay. And the work that you do, does that allow you to, let me ask a better question. Do you help translate that data you get to a more understandable form?
Right, I do. I would describe it as more of an art than a science, because what we're really doing is we are interpreting proprietary records or business records, kept in the ordinary course of business by various companies, and they lay them out very differently. So there's, not a class or a dictionary or a book or there's some online resources, but they're only reliable as the authors that post them. And of course, they change from time to time. So you're talking about T-Mobile, Sprint, AT&T, Verizon, in this case, U.S. Cellular. They all have different formats, different names for their data fields, different meanings. When you speak to some of the reps, they'll say, ignore this field and look at the other one. So it's a very murky area, and as I say, I find it to be more art than science in interpreting those records. But that's part of what we do, is we look at those records, we talk to people, we talk to representatives from the company, if available, if they're willing to be forthcoming. We talk to other experts in the industry who've worked these cases, and we attempt to surmise or deduce what this data is, and then, of course, try to make it understandable for the attorneys who are working the cases.
Well, let's talk about what training have you had specifically for interpreting cell tower data or call detail records?
Well, I've had no formal training because no formal training exists, to the best of my knowledge, and I define formal training as being a peer-reviewed curricula that it's subject to well-settled disciplines for digital forensics. And in fact, there's no governing body in the United States with regard to computer or digital forensics. So there's sort of a little bit of a lack of governance, and there has been, I want to say, sort of an industry consensus on what best standards might be. And right now, cell tower forensics, as I say, there's no college course on it. It's usually taught by law enforcement officers who themselves were not cellular engineers, and so they're taking all of the knowledge that they've learned through osmosis and over the years of working cases, like the FBI CAST team is an example, and then they share this to other law enforcement officers to help them read these records. And attorneys will attend CLEs, digital forensic examiners will learn about this in breakout sessions at security conferences. So I don't really characterize that as formal training, but you've got that, you've got self-study, research. One area that I've done is I read cases. And the reason I read cases is because there you have FBI being compelled to discuss the methodologies that they're using to read these call data records and the tools that they're using, and they're discussing it because they're, again, compelled to do so. You wouldn't otherwise find this information, in a book or on the internet or on someone's website or even in a publicly available class at a junior college or something. So the cases, fortunately, collect that or coalesce that testimony, and the courts divine whether it's admissible or not. So I do read cases. There's a lot of ways to get up to speed, and it's very fast evolving, right, as the technology changes.
Okay. Now, what training have you done regarding interpreting cell tower records and call detail records?
Well, I mentioned the self-study and independent research. I confer with other experts. I attend security conferences, numerous security conferences, and I as an attorney, we have to earn continuing legal education, but as an information security practitioner, I also have to maintain CPEs, which is continuing professional education. So I have to do X number of years, hours per year, attending a bunch of classes, and again, there are seminars, conferences, vendor presentations, and at these conferences and vendor presentations, cell tower forensics sometimes comes up as one of the subsets. Again, it's a small subdivision of mobile device forensics, which in and of itself is a subdivision of computer forensics, right, or digital forensics. So the training I've attended are these information security type presentations.
Yeah. And just jumping back a little bit, let's discuss what certifications do you hold as a digital forensic examiner?
I have one from EC Council. It's the Computer Hacking Forensic Examiner. I have two from ISC Squared, which is a governing body, and it's a Certified Information System Security Professional. It's sort of considered the gold standard in the industry, kind of an inch thick, mile wide, so it's not really deep in any one particular area, but it's very broad. A bit of a difficult exam. I have the Certified Cyber Forensics Professional from that same organization, Certified Information Privacy Professional, and I think I've got one regarding Sarbanes-Oxley, which regards technical and administrative controls that companies have to have with regards to IT infrastructure. Yeah.
And just briefly explain to the jury how your certifications and experience in those realms help you interpreting cell tower data and call detail records.
Well, again, the certifications themselves are sort of a marketing thing. It's something that you need to do in order to get jobs and be recognized as an expert. But because the reputable certifications require continuing education, it's those courses that you're going to, it's those people that you are working with and collaborating with, and that you see at the conferences on a regular basis. And for me, I not only attend them, but I speak at a lot of the conferences. In fact, I've actually presented to the judiciary in Minnesota, where I live, on cell tower forensics, helping attorneys and judges to understand what it is that we're dealing with right now in this case. And so I don't know that the certifications themselves are particularly helpful. For example, when I got my CISSP and I went and studied to do that.
Why don't you ask another question?
Okay.
Thank you, Your Honor. And actually, Mr. Harrington, Your Honor, may I approach?
You may.
Mr. Harrington, I'm going to hand you a document entitled Defense Exhibit O.
Your Honor, to move things along, we have no objection to O.
Exhibit O is admitted.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Harrington, that's a copy of your CV.
It is. I'm not sure what revision it is, but yes, it is.
Okay. Mr. Harrington, I'm going to direct you more to this case. Did you review call detail records and tower records regarding this case?
I did, yes.
And were those call detail records for Jason Carter and Bill Carter's mobile device?
Yes, I did review those call detail records
And-
for a limited time frame, yes.
And was there a U.S. Cellular tower dump for the date including June 19th, 2015 that was provided to you for review?
Right, and the tower dump that would have included lots of other callers using that particular switch, yes.
Okay. And you had an opportunity to review, and did you analyze and create information based on those call detail records in that tower dump?
I did, yes.
Okay. Your Honor, may I approach?
You may.
Mr. Harrington, I'm going to show you pages marked Defense Exhibit P through U, which is an umbrella. Do you recognize those pages?
Yes, I do.
Could you tell the jury what those are?
There are several pages here, and these are a map, a demonstrative map, illustrating a number of calls that were placed within specific time frames to a mobile device registered to the defendant, along with cell tower connections that were made by that mobile device, again, for limited time ranges and also within a limited geographic area. So it's basically some maps with some illustrations on it, some demonstratives.
Did you prepare those?
I did prepare them, yes.
And you prepared those reviewing the call detail records and the U.S. cell tower dump that we spoke of previously?
Right, independently, yes.
Your Honor, the defense would offer exhibits P through U.
No foundational objections.
Exhibits P, Q, R, S, T, and U are all admitted.
Your Honor,
Yes.
may the witness use the display to provide these to publish these to the jury?
Yes.
Mr. Harrington, if you just let me know when you'd like me to turn the projector on.
Stand by, please.
Mr. Harrington, does this map that you're showing the jury right now comport with Exhibit P that you just reviewed in paper form?
It appears to, yes, sir.
And would you briefly run through the rest of the paper exhibits, Q through U, and just on screen and indicate whether or not what you're showing on screen comports with the paper copy?
Very well. So I'm looking at the first of what appears to be 6 exhibits here. The first here is labeled as P, as in Papa, and it is now displayed on the screen. The next is Q, as in Quebec, displayed on the screen. R is in Romeo, Exhibit R is currently displayed on the screen. Exhibit S is in Sierra is currently on the screen. Exhibit T is in Tango is currently on the screen.
Okay, Mr. Harrington, would you go back one? I just want to make sure that we're looking at the same document.
Yeah, it appears as though this one here is Exhibit U is in uniform. So it's out of order on my electronic copy versus the papers and the labeling that you've provided here.
Your Honor, may I approach?
You may.
Mr. Harrington, you're saying that this screen right here that shows 2 towers and 8 to noon, that's Exhibit U?
It does appear to be, yes.
And in page number 6 on that document that you're looking at on your computer screen, is that Exhibit T?
It does appear to be as well, yes.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Harrington. I'll just leave those right with you.
Thank you.
Now, Mr. Harrington, you're familiar with what call detail records look like.
Depending on the company, they're different between each company, vastly different in some cases.
You're familiar, in this case, have you familiarized yourself with call detail records from U.S. Cellular?
And Verizon as well, yes.
May I approach, Your Honor?
You may.
I'm going to hand you 2 documents labeled Defense Exhibit B and Defense Exhibit W. Please take a look at those and let me know if you recognize those.
I do recognize both exhibits.
Could you tell me what Exhibit V is?
Visa and Victor appears to be an Excel spreadsheet that has been filtered to include the phone number that was registered to William Carter, and it's limited by a date range of 18 June through 21 June of 2015.
And that's information you reviewed in this case?
I have reviewed it, yes.
Okay. And that's for the phone number ending in 3073?
That's correct, both incoming and outgoing calls as recorded by U.S. Cellular.
Your Honor, the defense offers Exhibit V.
No objection.
Exhibit V is admitted.
And Mr. Harrington, just so you know, the Mr. Carter, the senior Mr. Carter, his actual name is Bill or Billy. Just so you know, it's not William.
Oh, so sorry. Yeah.
No problem. And I'll direct your attention to Exhibit W. Do you recognize that document?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Would that be a document that compiles the call detail records for a phone number ending in 7895?
It does appear to be, yes.
Do you know whose phone number that is?
I believe that that is the number that is registered to the defendant, or was at the time.
Okay. So, and you use that information in compiling the maps we have here and in reviewing for this case?
That's right. Now, of course, there's scores of rows and thousands of numbers, and if one was altered in some way, I wouldn't have caught it, of course, but this does appear to be the authentic copy I've been working off of.
Okay. Defense offers Exhibit W.
Your Honor, I just want to verify, I think it's the same as 37 that's already been admitted. So I just want to verify that we're all working off the same data. May I approach and look at the exhibit?
You may.
Your Honor, the state would object. It's duplicative and cumulative. 37 is the same thing as W.
Your Honor, if I may,
If you may what?
may I address the state's objection?
Yes.
Thank you, Judge. Your Honor, this is a specific exhibit that was provided to Mr. Harrington. I'm working at establishing the documents he specifically reviewed, and he also created some electronic exhibits for the jury that I would like to get in. However, I need to establish that he was provided a specific document, that this is the document he reviewed, and that he created information from that. He was not provided the state's exhibit that's already in evidence. Therefore, it's my view that I need to offer a separate defense exhibit in order to establish that information.
Well, I'm not sure that you do if they're identical, but Exhibit W is admitted.
All right, and Your Honor, may I approach again?
You may.
Mr. Harrington, I'm approaching you with a very scary-looking binder.
Not as heavy as my laptop.
Just take a look at that. And actually, Mr. Harrington, in order to ease this, I'm going to ask you to maybe shut your screen off for a minute. It's my understanding you have something called U.S. Cell Dump that you reviewed for this case.
You must be referring to the February 2015 cellular site listing across the country?
I'm actually reviewing the U.S. Cell Call Dump.
Yes, that's right, the 15,000 rows, yes, sir.
I'm not going to ask you to review everything, but would you just maybe take a couple seconds and do a spot check between those two? Because I would prefer to not have to ask the jury to read through those 600 pages. But I want to make sure that you can say that appears to be the same document that you created an electronic version of.
A point of clarification, Counsel. Counselor?
Yes.
I have not created the spreadsheet that corresponds to this printout. I was provided with that spreadsheet as raw U.S. Cellular data, so I just wanted to clarify, I haven't created anything. So you had asked me to, I'm a little confused, you had asked me to turn off my screen, and then you asked me to look at this and see if this corresponds to some electronic copy I had reviewed, so I just need a little clarity on that.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
Your Honor, for the record, I've asked Mr. Harrington to prepare a read-only version of proposed Exhibit X. In the meantime, I would offer Exhibit X in paper form.
Any objection?
I'm just confirming that the voluminous paper exhibit I've been given matches this electronic file as best I can, just looking at a few pages.
Thank you, Mr. Harrington.
Your Honor, I have no objection.
Exhibit X is admitted. And what is this, counsel? Exhibit X?
Your Honor, Exhibit X it's what's called a U.S. cell tower dump. I'm going to probably botch the description, but from my understanding,
That's sufficient for my purposes, counsel.
thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, may I approach?
You may.
Thank you. Mr. Harrington.
Sir.
All right. I am going to show you what has been labeled Defense Exhibit S1, and I'm handing you Exhibit S. Would you please take a look at Exhibit S? Let me know if S1 appears to be an accurate representation, but in a blown-up form.
It does appear to be yes.
Defense requests the permission to publish S1 to the jury.
You may.
Nate, would you like me to use all?
May I use the state's easel? Actually, I'm going to leave it there so they can see the screen, but I appreciate the offer. Mr. Harrington, have you had an opportunity to review an electronic form of that big binder, Exhibit X, and create a read-only electronic version?
I did just now. It's 446 pages in a PDF format, and it has been saved to a thumb drive to be provided to the jury.
Thank you. And the documents on that thumb drive, would you briefly discuss or explain what is on that thumb drive that you created?
There are a total of 5 documents on the thumb drive for your review. One of them is the 446-page dump that we just discussed, and so this is a dump of, I believe, all calls that were handled on a particular switch as reported by U.S. Cellular. So there's thousands and thousands and thousands of other callers. It's quite a privacy nightmare. And they do include numbers for the defendant. However, if I remember correctly, I did not find a return for Bill Carter's number ending in 3073 in that particular dump. Nor did I have an opportunity to confer with U.S. Cellular to find out why that or any other number was missing. The other documents that are on that thumb drive that has been prepared for you is a demonstrative of a compass with 360 degrees, and we will use that to provide some explanation of what an azimuth is and how we look at cell towers to figure out which direction that an antenna is facing. unaltered, non-highlighted version of call detail records for the defendant's primary phone. That's the one I believe ending in 7895 for the day in question. I think it spans 6 pages. And we also have yet another that's only 1 page or 2 pages, I think, for Bill Carter Sr. And then finally, we have these maps that we're looking at here, the 6 pages that I believe were labeled P through T, perhaps. That is also on that thumb drive for your review.
And you created that thumb drive and the documents on that thumb drive?
I did create that, yes. I did prepare that for the jurors.
Okay. And do you believe that will assist the jurors in digesting some of this electronic information to have it in electronic form as opposed to just paper form?
Right, I do. I think that if I explain things sufficiently and you just take a few notes, that when you look at these, it will all make sense.
Your Honor, at this time, the defense would offer Exhibit Y, which is the thumb drive to which Mr. Harrington is referring.
Your Honor, the state has no objection, assuming as it relates to the compass that was referenced at some point, we'll get a copy of that exhibit.
You have to, and in fact, if you want to come up, we can show it to you right now.
That'd be great. Your Honor, may I approach?
You may.
Fair enough.
Mr. Harrington, for the record, I'm handing you a sticker marked Exhibit Y. Would you please stick that on that thumb drive in a place where they can both see your little signature that authenticates that thumb drive and the sticker?
Mr. Bull, apparently you do not have any objection to Exhibit Y.
No, sir, I do not.
Exhibit Y is admitted.
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, may I again allow Mr. Harrington to publish those electronic maps to the jury and give him a little latitude to explain some of his conclusions?
He may publish the maps as he testifies.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Harrington, I'm going to direct you to access the maps that we spoke of previously. Those would be exhibits S through U. I believe you have those in electronic form that you can publish to the jury on the screen.
I think it's actually P through U.
I'm sorry, yes it is. Exhibits P through U. Thank you, Your Honor.
I would just like to make a quick comment here about viewing these in Acrobat Reader. If we view the entire page as you currently see it, it's not legible. I can obviously zoom in to make it more legible for the jurors and others. And if that will necessarily exclude information, so if you need me to zoom back out or zoom in, I appreciate if you direct me to do so.
I can do that, Mr. Harrington. Thank you. Let's talk very briefly. Exhibit P, that's what's on the screen right now?
That's right.
And just briefly explain to the jury what Exhibit P shows that you created.
All right, this is a demonstrative for illustration purposes only, not scientific, that shows the call records that were logged by U.S. Cellular for the number ending in 7895 for a specific time frame. In this case, it looks like 8:20 in the morning through 9:08 in the evening for the 19th of June of 2015.
And Exhibit Q, which I believe is the next page. Oh, sorry.
I didn't finish. So you see a map there. It's not just your regular Google Maps view. Sometimes I do that in other cases. But here I've created a little bit of a quasi 3D map just to, again, for illustrative purposes. And what we have are these cell towers that are in question that the handset or the mobile device connected to. along with the antenna, bearing in mind that these particular towers have 3 antennas that face out like a pie shape, 120 degrees each. And so those directionality of the towers are represented illustratively here, along with an approximate coverage as it's published by this company, U.S. Cellular. And each tower is represented by a hexadecimal value here, which is found in their records. And the last character of that, I know you can't see it from here, I'll zoom in real quick, even though I wasn't asked to. If we just zoom in real quickly here. For example, you can see a tower at the top of the page here, 2B9. The hexadecimal value that identifies that tower in the U.S. Cellular's database is 2B, 2B9. And the others, as you see here, for example, A53, B32, B31, again, these first 2 characters identify the tower in the database. And then that last character, the 3, the 2, or the 1 in this case, refers to the sector, or which one of those 3 antennas that we're talking about. You may have heard some other testimony that explained this. So that's what all this is. It's showing the Carter Farms, the towers in question, the directionality of the antenna, and of course the map itself. And then at the bottom of the demonstrative exhibit we have the call records. You can think of this as a legend if you want. It shows if it's an outgoing or inbound call. The 911 call is in red for your convenience, and then it shows the connectivity of the tower, and there's a little dotted line up to a timeline here to try to make it easy. It's a lot of data to put on one page, but I did my best to lay it out.
And did you break this data out in the subsequent pages?
I did, upon request, I did break it out, yes.
So, and just before we move from this, we're looking at down below, it looks like it says in and out and a phone number. Are all those, does that denote the calls that were replaced from the phone number ending in 7895, which is known as Mr. Carter's primary phone?
Well, not just placed, but received, where there was a connection made, whether irrespective of whether it went to voicemail or it was a dropped call or whether he picked up, or doesn't matter.
Okay. And I'm going to direct you to, it would be Exhibit S. And I think the time period is 11 to 11:15 on Exhibit S, if that might help you if you take a look at on your screen.
I believe I have it up here. Zoom in for the jurors, and if you need me to zoom out, please let me know.
Could you talk the jury through or explain what's shown on Exhibit S?
Here we have the calls that were placed or received as recorded by U.S. Cellular between the time frame of 11:08, it includes that 911 call that was placed at 11:11, all the way up through almost 11:16. And according to U.S. Cellular, during this narrow time frame, there were a total of 5 cell towers that were utilized to provide service to this mobile device.
And how does U.S. Cellular know that? I'm sorry, what information have you received from U.S. Cellular to allow you to say that?
Well, U.S. Cellular maintains a network of towers and service, and part of those services is to hand off calls to other carriers and to landlines and other interfaces. And in this case, the limited data set that we're looking at is this mobile device on U.S. Cellular using U.S. Cellular towers that are in the area, and U.S. Cellular logs which tower served the communication, whether it was a call that was placed or a call that was received or one that was routed through to voicemail. So it creates an entry, and I'm not sure if we're going to look at that later, but we can certainly do that and show you where to find that in those call detail records.
Now, when the jury looks at these call detail records versus the tower, how can they distinguish between these two documents?
The only mapping that the jurors are going to have is going to be the cell tower identification and sector that I will show you precisely what column to find that in when we get to that point, if you question me about it. And then these cell tower IDs that you see here. I think there's a laser somewhere here for me to use. Oh, it's gone now. Oh, here it is. Let's just turn this on.
Your Honor, may the witness use a laser pointer to specifically indicate on the screen where he wants the jury to look?
You may.
So this value right here that you see is a label for each cell tower, and those will be found in the call detail records. Now, it should be noted here that the call detail records themselves, unfortunately, don't list out where these cell towers are found, so you might be wondering, how did I get them on a map? Other companies do provide that information in the call detail records. They provide a street address oftentimes, or they provide a lat longe, or sometimes both. Unfortunately, U.S. Cellular makes it more difficult for us, so I had to consult yet another database where they list out all the towers that they have, thousands of them, many thousands of them in the country, and then cross-reference this hexadecimal value to find the actual street address and the latitude, longitude. So it was that work that allowed us to, both me and I assume the state's expert, to make these maps for you.
So this map you created based on information you received from U.S. Cellular, and then of course data pulls from U.S. Cellular.
On this particular page, yes, this all came exclusively from U.S. Cellular.
Okay, I'm a little confused. So help me, and obviously help the jury understand. Are you saying that these 5 towers were used by that mobile device that used the phone number 7895?
To the extent that we consider U.S. Cellular records to be reliable, yes, that is what this map states.
So I'm going to look at Tower B32. Now, I guess the pie piece, or do you call it a sector?
Yeah, I would refer to that as a sector, but you can call it a wedge or something else, whatever you're comfortable with.
That doesn't seem to point at 132 Perry Street. Are you saying that there's still cell coverage from that tower at that address?
Well, I don't know that the handset was at that address for the B32 call, because although I've had access to some corroborating evidence, that's really for the jury to determine. But what I am saying is that for that particular time frame, in this case it looks like 11:14 and 36 seconds, that mobile device, whether it was strapped to a Peregrine Falcon or not, wherever it was utilizing service provided by that tower, B32.
So if the jury has other evidence that you haven't seen, or that you aren't privy to, that can place individuals using a phone at 132 Perry Street, what could you deduce about the coverage of that tower B32?
Well, if there is evidence placing the handset at 132 Perry Street and a connection was made to Tower B32, the reasonable and logical inference is that B32 provides coverage to that street address, and which, looking at the map, is not hard to believe at all. It's plausible.
Well, why is that?
It's plausible because these sectors are, I think of them as suggestions, frankly. They don't exist in such a way that as soon as you step on an imaginary dotted line, the coverage stops and some other tower has to serve the call, or the other sector of that, the other antenna of that same tower is going to serve the call. It doesn't work that way. These are very sort of gray and shifting, and truly the only way to know the actual strength and coverage of any cell tower at any given time is to use specialized hardware and or software and develop what the companies call a propagation map, and that's where they drive around and they actually measure the strength of the various towers in relationship to geographic obstructions and radiomagnetic interference from labs and other things that may be around, power lines, whatever, vegetation, so on and so forth, congestion, right, in an urban area or freeway like Interstate 25 or something like that. So they drive around and they develop these propagation maps, and they look very different than this, those that I have seen. So these, again, are demonstrative. This is a rough approximation of the reach and the beam width, if you will, or the sector width of 120 degrees. And it's very plausible that if for whatever reason any other tower were unavailable due to a variety of other factors that perhaps we'll get into later, that tower, B32, could serve a call at 132 Perry Street. That seems very reasonable to me. Yeah.
Thank you. And looking at this map, if, let's say, a location is reaching towards the end of one of those pie pieces, is it more likely that it may look that a particular mobile device in that location might look for other towers to connect to with a stronger signal?
It might, and that depends, of course, on the quality of the antenna of the mobile device. You all may recall a few years ago the controversy with the iPhone and its external antenna on the outside of the case, as an example. So some mobile devices have better ability to receive signals than others. Certainly, as I mentioned earlier, it could be congestion. The cellular companies use proprietary algorithms that we don't have any access to that determine switching and load balancing between towers. So if one tower might be more ideal, closer, stronger signal, it may be passed over by the network in favor of another tower that's weaker, or a little bit further away or out of the way because it's congested. So there are a variety of factors that could go into choosing which tower will serve the call, and it's not always the strongest or closest, although that does seem to be the predominant factor.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, you're saying that U.S. Cellular has a way to figure out which tower they want to serve a particular mobile device at a location?
Right, bearing in mind that the phone chooses the tower, but the phone chooses the tower subject to limitations that are imposed on it by the network. So, you know, all the networks have their own proprietary algorithms for choosing these towers, and there may be cases out there where they brought in experts to discuss it, but I've not yet read one.
Okay. Thank you. Now, you talked about propagation maps and drive testing. Just can you maybe briefly help me understand a little bit more how that could help us make a decision about
Sure.
coverage at a particular location?
Sure. Well, I can tell you I wish I could afford the equipment because I think it would help me a lot, although in this case maybe not because so many years have passed. And so you've got a lot of towers out there. I don't know if the hardware, the firmware, and the software has been changed the last, what has it been, 3-4 years now since this occurred. It probably has changed, right? And so, for example, the FBI has a team called the Cellular Analysis Response Team, CAST.
Objection, narrative, and non-responsive to the question.
Why don't you ask another question, Mr. Olson?
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Harrington, would you just describe to the jury what you know as GAR, the acronym GAR?
GAR is a tool developed by a civilian company down in Florida. It stands for Gladiator Autonomous Receiver. It's made by Gladiator Forensics, and they sell it exclusively to the FBI and to Department of Homeland Security. And it's for driving around and mapping cell tower strengths. And it's probably a similar tool to what the cellular companies themselves use when they drive around to develop propagation maps. It's about the size of a backpack, and the whole kit costs around $120,000.
Okay. And are there other methods to determine what towers service a particular location?
Say the question again so I can answer it properly. You don't have to rephrase it, just restate it, please.
Are there other methods to determine what cellular towers service a particular location?
Well, of course, one method is to simply use the handset and then go back and get these records. But I do not know if there are apps available for Android that would allow someone to see all the available towers. There might very well be. I don't believe there is for iOS because it's a closed ecosystem. But for Android, it's an open source code, so anyone can develop apps for the phone. And it's possible, I suppose, that there's an app out there or more that could map out all the cell towers that are available in an area. I don't know.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this: what sort of organizations have access to these types of tools?
Well, with regards to the app that I talked about, I would not consider that to produce reliable evidence because it's just being developed by some programmer that threw it on the App Store, right? But, and maybe law enforcement might use it as a tool, sort of like a polygraph, to point them in the right direction. But to answer your question, the professionally developed tools that sort of are peer-reviewed and have been tested and calibrated, sort of like radar detectors and that sort of thing, breathalyzers, those are going to be made available exclusively to law enforcement. So you have sheriff's departments that can afford the $120,000, as I mentioned, FBI, Department of Homeland Security, and others.
Okay. And do cellular tower technicians also have access to information like this?
Well,
Or-
of course,
or
they need
tools?
to. They need to in order to determine the efficacy of the available towers and whether or not they need to lease more, build more, or do some more bandwidth or load balancing, as I had mentioned earlier. Yeah.
Your Honor, may I approach?
May.
Thank you. Mr. Harrington, have you reviewed any information from any of these sources that provide you a little better idea of what sort of cell phone coverage appeared at 132 Perry Street? And while I ask you that question, please let the record note I'm handing Mr. Harrington defense proposed exhibit Z as in zebra. So, Mr. Harrington, the question was, have you reviewed any information from law enforcement personnel or cell tower technicians that provide you maybe a better idea of the coverage at 132 Perry Street?
I have, yes.
Do you recognize proposed exhibit Z that I provided to you?
I do recognize proposed exhibit Z, and I think I have an electronic copy here I can put up on the screen if you want me to.
Did you rely on proposed exhibit Z in making some of your conclusions and in your analysis in this case?
I took it under advisement. It's not conclusive, but it raises some interesting questions.
Okay. One moment, Your Honor.
Your Honor, may we approach?
Again,
The record state objects to any reference to this exhibit or its admission due to its hearsay.
and at this point, Mr. Bull, I don't think it's actually been offered yet.
Your Honor, defense does offer exhibit Z.
I will tentatively admit it, subject to the objection. May I see that, please? Well, it does in fact appear to be hearsay, and that objection is sustained.
Your Honor, may I briefly address that?
You may.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Your Honor, perhaps it's a discussion that should take place out of the presence of the jury.
Perhaps it is. Can you move on and deal with other things? We can perhaps address this over the noon hour.
Your Honor, it may be able to be addressed at sidebar. May we just have one more moment with you?
Yes.
Thank you, Judge. Mr. Harrington, would you describe exhibit Z, or proposed exhibit Z that I handed you? And perhaps the judge might have it.
Thank you so much.
Your Honor, I'm going to object to describing an exhibit the court has indicated is not admissible.
I think the witness can generically describe it without getting into detail.
This exhibit appears to be correspondence between somebody in an educational institution and law enforcement regarding, among other things, cell tower connectivity in March of the following year after the crime, and the fact that there were 5 towers.
Objection, Your Honor.
I think the witness has responded to the question. Ask another question.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Harrington, is it my understanding that you said law enforcement has access to tools that provide them the number of towers that can hit a specific location?
That's true. In my experience in these cases, including state cases, the FBI CAS team is brought in most, if not all, of the ones I've worked on, to provide the expertise necessary to validate these cell tower assertions. And here that does not appear to have occurred. I don't know whether law enforcement, other than FBI, provided those services there in Marion County for the prosecution. I don't know. The exhibit you referenced seems to suggest that perhaps something like that did happen. I don't know.
So, are you saying that that exhibit referenced a possible test?
It certainly
Your Honor,
represents a
objection,
test.
speculation.
I think the witness responded, it simply represents a test. The answer's in. Please move on.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Harrington, let's talk about Exhibit S. How many cell phone towers are on Exhibit S?
There are 5 towers on this particular exhibit.
And in that communication, and who else was on that communication, the proposed Exhibit Z?
Your Honor, again, renew my objection.
Sustained.
Is this map consistent with the communication that's on Exhibit Z?
Your Honor, same objection.
Well, at this point, your objection is sustained.
And just to circle back around, Mr. Harrington, there's 5 separate cell phone towers on Exhibit S.
There are, yes. Yes, we've established that.
Okay. Based on, do you believe that all 5 of these cell phone towers could service 132 Perry Street?
Objection form.
Why don't you rephrase your question, counsel?
Mr. Harrington, how many of those cell phone towers do you believe could service 132 Perry Street?
Again, Your Honor, objection form.
Why don't you rephrase it again, if you would, please, counsel?
Mr. Harrington, have you formed an opinion regarding the number of cell phone towers present on Exhibit S that could service 132 Perry Street?
Yes.
What is that opinion?
My opinion, which is limited strictly and solely to the U.S. cellular towers that were available and reported in these call detail records, are that at least these 5, if not more towers, could service this address.
And I just want to, again, confirm that's consistent with that communication from March of 2016.
Your Honor, objection.
Sustained.
So,
Your Honor, may we approach?
You may.
Mr. Harrington, did you have an opportunity to review the information that the state's expert witness, Mr. Valencius, provided to this jury?
I did some time ago review the maps prepared by Mr. Valencius, and I did some time ago review his depositions transcript, and I did also review briefly his a draft of his testimony, and I also reviewed his CV some time ago, none of which is committed to memory.
Did you form an opinion as to the completeness or accuracy of the information Mr. Valencius provided?
Yes, I did.
What was that opinion?
I did find that that Mr. Valencius had made some ultimate conclusions in his testimony that I think experts should generally not make. It belongs to the finder of fact, namely where...
Your Honor, I'm going to object at this point to relevance.
I think the witness's response up to this point is fine. Why don't you ask another question, please?
Mr. Harrington, what factual concerns do you have with the information Mr. Valencius provided?
The underlying factual concerns I have was only that there were one, perhaps two or more, again, not committed to memory, tower communications that were, I'm sure, inadvertently omitted from his maps for the time frame in question.
Did you communicate with U.S. Cellular or any helpline to help you understand why those may have been omitted?
Yes, I did.
What information did you obtain?
So I had to make several calls, and I just want to point out that these law enforcement assistance centers that are there to handle subpoena requests and that sort of thing is not a cost revenue center. They don't put a lot of money into it, and they, again, it's a service that they wish they didn't have to provide, but they have to. So, having said that, when I call, I try to be as respectful as possible because they can tell me to go pound sand, and sometimes they do. I don't have the power of a subpoena or a warrant. So I called, and I said, hey, I need some help interpreting your call detail records because unlike all the other companies that provide a nice little legend for us to work off of, there's no legend here. And they said, well, yeah, we send out a legend with the subpoenas. And I never saw one. I never got one. So I said, help me understand some of these fields. And I think what you're alluding to with respect to some missing tower communications was there may have been several instances of duplicate entries in U.S. Cellular records regarding subscriber-to-subscriber calls, and if counsel asks me to elaborate, I will. And then also calls in connection to voicemail. And so here it seems that the state's expert omitted those calls under the belief that they don't count or should be disregarded. But in fact, U.S. Cellular does log an entry to a cell tower, and it would seem to me that it's valid, so I called to ask them, is this valid or should I disregard it for some reason? And I was told, nope, that's a valid cell tower communication. The fact that it went to voicemail doesn't matter. It's a hit. It's a record.
Is my understanding correct that what you're saying is if it shows up in the call detail records, that's an accurate communication between a handset and a cell phone tower?
I think it's a rebuttable presumption, yes. I think it's a presumption that if it shows up there and we're considering those records reliable, then yeah, it's real.
And that's the information you got from U.S. Cellular?
Right, that's the source of record there, yes.
So do you agree with Mr. Valencius's, I guess we'll call it opinion, that only 2 cell phone towers service 132 Perry Street?
Your Honor, I'm going to object that misstates the record.
Overruled. The witness may answer. Do you remember the question?
I do, thank you, Your Honor. The question was, do I agree with Mr. Valencius's opinion that only 2 cell towers were involved apparently in this same time frame that we're looking at? If that is indeed his opinion or was his opinion, I would disagree with that, yes.
And so let me ask you this question. Would you agree with the opinion that the cell tower records, specifically between on Exhibit S, indicate with any degree of certainty that that mobile device left 132 Perry Street?
No, that's because of the nature of the ambiguous nature of these coverage maps and the capability of towers to reach varying distances and widths. It is absolutely inconclusive that the mobile device moved. In other cases, I could say it had because of long distances or where it fell well out of the range of the first tower where a call was made, but that type of profile does not exist here, so it is inconclusive to say that this mobile device moved 50 feet, 100 feet, 400 feet, a mile, any distance at all.
Okay. And I just want to ask a couple questions. I'll direct you to Exhibit U as an umbrella. That's the 1115 through 1430 slide, if that helps.
Exhibit U, as I have it labeled, is 1113 to 111557. Is this one of the ones that was transposed, perhaps T?
It is.
Oh. Would you like me to look at Exhibit T as an
Yes,
angle?
please. Yes, please. Thank you, Mr. Harrington.
Well, what you're looking at has been admitted into evidence as Exhibit U.
Okay.
This document right there.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mine's labeled T, thank you.
Now, if operating under the assumption that the mobile device that in question was at 132 Perry Street, we see a number of different cell tower connections even after 11:16 a.m.
Yes, that's true.
And
Yes,
does
there
that
are a number of cell towers that are invoked by this mobile device, spanning from 11:18 through 2:24 in the afternoon. Yes.
and you haven't been provided with any information about when later in the afternoon that mobile device may have left 132 Perry Street, right?
No, I have no independent knowledge of where that handset or that mobile device was. Yeah.
Is it your understanding that you reviewed more information than Mr. Valencius in this case?
I believe that I have. I'm not privy to everything that Mr. Valencius looked at, but based on what he's presented, it would seem that maybe I had.
Okay. And I just want to run through a couple other things. Now, you are being paid to be here, correct?
Yes, yes, sir.
All right, and clearly you're being paid by Mr. Carter's defense team.
Right, I've been retained by the defense team, yes.
Okay. Are you being paid to review information and just give your opinion?
I'm not sure I understand the question, Counselor.
I can ask it better. Is your testimony based on your review of the information, regardless of the outcome?
Oh, yes, definitely. Right. Yeah, I'm not a professional witness. I spend far more working than I do testifying, and I don't want to be characterized as a hired gun.
And have you worked with law enforcement before,
I have indeed, yes.
as well as defense team?
Yes, that's true.
And your professional opinion is that the 5 cell phone towers on Exhibit S could each service 132 Perry Street.
My professional opinion is that the 5 towers on Exhibit S, that it's plausible, perhaps even probable, that they served the address. If I had corroborating evidence of the existence of the handset on site, such as some of the information that we've discussed earlier today during my testimony, then I would say, yes, it would be. But without corroborating evidence, without knowing where the handset was, without those variables being addressed with absolute certainty, I would say that it is possible, plausible, and in fact probable that all 5 towers would serve that address, that location that you see in the map represented by the red pin.
Thank you, Mr. Harrington. I have no further questions at this time.
Cross-examination, Mr. Bull.
Sir, would you go ahead and turn your screen off for a second? Your Honor, permission to prepare the well.
You may.
Mr. Bull, would you ask that I also turn off my
No,
laptop
if
screen?
you need your laptop, sir, to answer my questions, feel free to refer to it. Just let me know if you are. Sir, I'm going to show you a demonstrative you would agree with me, that's just a blow-up of your front slide that contains everything, correct?
No, I don't think it is. I'm not sure, but let me look for that
Well, let
real
me
quick.
just verify that I'm looking at the same thing so that we're both on the same page here.
Do you know the label number by chance?
It would appear to be Exhibit P.
P is in Papa. Got it.
Sir, do you agree that this is a blow-up? And I'll hand you Defense Exhibit W in a moment.
Yes, Mr. Bull.
Your Honor, permission just to publish the blow-up?
You may.
Sir, how many mistakes did you make on this exhibit?
Mistakes, well, I guess it depends how you characterize them, but probably dozens or scores when I'm working on a draft.
This isn't the draft, right?
No, this is not the draft.
You didn't intentionally write the wrong tower.
No, I didn't intentionally write the wrong tower. No.
So if you made mistakes, it's not intentional, it's incompetence.
It would be inadvertence.
Objection. It's argumentative.
Objection is sustained.
Sir, you, just so we get some background here, you're not a cellular engineer.
No, I'm not. I'm a
You're not?
cybersecurity engineer.
You're not published in the fields of cell phones or cell data records.
I'm published in the field of digital forensics, which is inclusive of those disciplines you just mentioned. So I think the answer is yes.
You've never published anything specifically to cell towers and map visualization, have you?
My CLE presentation is a publication, so the answer is yes on that. But I don't have any law review articles or anything in any peer-reviewed magazines regarding specifically cell towers. Yeah.
You're not even certified by Cellular, are you?
No need to be.
And you've never received any trainings or certifications by a cell phone provider like US Cellular.
Not by the provider. No, not by a carrier. No.
You're a certified cyber forensics professional, correct?
That's one of the 5 certs that I have on my CV, yes.
And that will be deactivated as of 8/21 of 2020. It's going away.
Right, yeah, so they're decommissioning that particular certification. It wasn't making enough money for them, right.
And you've mentioned you took a singular Wisconsin State Bar legal CLE on the issue of cell towers, correct?
I did take a CLE that was focused on cell tower and call data records. Yes, that's true.
You have 0 collegiate level education or training in cell tower mapping or cell tower mapping visualization.
Only because there isn't any that I know of, but yes, that's true as well.
Okay. And this is only the second time you've ever actually even testified in front of a jury.
Right, because I'm not a professional witness, that's true as well.
But you do know that when you plot phone calls, if it is an outgoing call, meaning I pick up my handset and I dial the number, you use the originating cell tower, correct?
No, that's not true.
You don't use the originating
Pardon-
CLLI?
Pardon me, we're talking about U.S. Cellular. So with respect to the U.S. Cellular proprietary business records, yes, an outgoing call uses what they refer to as ORIG CLLI.
And if it's a terminating call, if you receive a phone call, you use the terminating CLLI.
Yes, that was what U.S. Cellular represented to me, and that's consistent with what we see in their data records, yes.
So why'd you put it the wrong way on your exhibit?
I'm not sure which one you're referring to.
Well, you mapped out, did you not, 6A3 on the exhibit? And that refers to a phone call that was received from Miss Jana Lane calling her brother at 11:08:48, right?
Stand by.
Mr. Bull, tell me again which exhibit you have as the demonstrative there for the jury.
Your Honor, I have it marked as P as in Paul, but if I'm incorrect, it's the largest one that has all the data.
Okay, thank you.
Your Honor, also permission to publish Exhibit 37 so the jury can look at what Mr. Harrington's looking at the same time.
You may.
Mr. Bull, you have in fact identified a mistake. The correct tower is B32 for the 11:08:48 call of 124 seconds duration.
So all you really did was establish here that Jana Lane was in fact in Centerville, Iowa when she made the phone call.
Yes, that would be true. Yep.
Okay, so
for
that
this
one's wrong.
particular call. Yep.
Go ahead and draw a line through that one. But you told us it should be B32, right?
That's right.
Now, sir, I'd also direct your attention to the 11:13:46 phone call. See that one?
Yes, I'm looking at the line directly from the call data records.
Right. You had two choices of towers to pick, didn't you? Only two. They would be OB32 or 0157, right?
No, sir, I don't believe 157 is a tower. I believe that's a landline trunk.
Right, but we wouldn't use that anyway, correct?
Right. The correct value there is Bravo 32, 0B32.
And so you have that one there. At 11:13:46, I'm sorry, sir, I have the wrong line. I don't want to mislead anyone. If we're here, 11:13:46. Your choices are OB93 for an outgoing call, right?
What time frame are you looking at, Mr. Bull?
11:13:46.
Correct, and the tower involved there is B93.
Right. So why did you say it was A03? You got that one wrong too, right?
Yes.
How many more of these do you want me to go through, sir?
Oh, keep going, please. You've identified 3 mistakes out of thousands of rows, but see if you can find some more, please. You must have more.
So I want to make sure I understand. Your testimony is it's up there. May I approach, Your Honor?
You may.
You also chose to not include phone calls that were made in your exhibit, didn't you?
I'm not sure. Perhaps I overlooked something in the thousands of rows that we've discussed.
Well, you would agree with me if we look at map Q. Well, actually, we'll just stay here for a second. On this one, you mapped the phone calls from Eddyville, correct? On P, as in Paul?
I don't have the towns memorized, but I believe Eddyville was one of the towers that was involved, yes.
The 6 Echo 2 tower, right?
I would need to look at a different spreadsheet to see if that's Eddyville. Do I need to do that, or?
No, my point is, when you entered Exhibit Q, and you included all of the times from 8 a.m. to 2000 hours, you didn't put Eddyville on the map, did you?
Well, I see, if we're looking at Exhibit P, I do see 6E2, which you've identified as being close to or in Eddyville, but you
No, I'm
just said it's
talking
not on
about
the map.
Exhibit Q as in Quebec, where you've indicated to the jury this is a map between 8 a.m. and 2000 hours.
Right, but this map is geographically confined. It's supposed to be a zoomed-in map, so it's not going to show a map or towers that fall outside of that geographic area. This one, the request was, let's zoom in on the Carter Farms, and I don't think that the Eddyville falls within this map. So that's all that is. That's just a...
So this is just the map for the phone calls in this area, right?
Right, this is an illustrative or a demonstrative exhibit for the calls in this area.
So
Zoomed in on the farm.
where's the incoming call from Jana Lane to her brother that took place right before the 911 call? I mean, we left that one out too, right? We're including all the calls at the right time. Where's the incoming call that should be there? You missed that one too, right?
I'm not sure yet. I'm looking. Bear with me, please.
Take your time.
So this is A53. Is that the one you're referring to at 11:08? I don't know who Jana Lane is. Is this an outgoing call to a number ending in 9617, or what are we talking about?
May I approach the witness?
You may.
Sir, I'm referring to this phone call at 11:08:48.
11:08:48. Okay. Got it. Okay, and so that call, 11:08:48, appears to be an incoming call from 7895. Wait, excuse me. An incoming call from 9617, whoever's number that is. You say it's the sister, is that right? 9617.
Sir, my question just was, you left it off Exhibit P, didn't you?
That would be Tower B32. I see B32 on the map on Q. Which one are we looking at? Which one did I leave it off of, you say?
Sir, you'd agree with me, up there's Q, right?
Yes.
And all I'm wondering, sir, is why would the defense leave off the phone call that should take place right there? Because it's not there, is it?
I don't see an 11:08:48. It goes 11:08:12 and then jumps straight to the 911 call. So yeah, it's an inadvertent omission for sure. Yeah, I don't know if there's any probative value to be inferred by the omission if it's somehow beneficial to the defense, but I assure you it was inadvertent. Thousands and thousands of records to pour through here. It's very tedious work.
But it's important that we're
Oh, it's
accurate.
very important work, no doubt. Very, very important. Someone's life is at stake here. You're absolutely right. Can't overestimate that at all.
Now, sir, if we were to have actually included that call, that would be another phone call that establishes Jason Carter is bouncing off B32, right?
It would, although it is reflected of the demonstrative that he's bouncing off of it anyway. But if you're concerned about that particular time frame right before the 911 call as being B32, yes. And I think we have other exhibits that focus or narrow in right on that time around the 911 call. Perhaps it's reflected there.
And again, on this one, we're just duplicating the errors that were previously made. The 11:13:46 call should not be 8:03, right?
That call should be B93, not A03 as I think you identified it.
Well, not as I identified, as you identified and published to this jury.
Well, for the record, when you spoke it on the record, sir. But we do see B93 on this map.
Now, again, sir, you chose to add to these towers, or to this list, every time Jason Carter called voicemail.
Right.
And for the jury's ability to understand, it's all the outgoing calls where he calls his own number is the easiest way to show which ones are his calls to check his own voicemail. If it says outgoing and then his phone number, that's a call to voicemail, right?
Yes, that's right.
And you believe it's appropriate to map voicemail calls?
I believe it's appropriate if it logs, if U.S. Cellular has logged a cell tower connection, and that information, that determination is based on representations made by staff to me, yes.
I understand that.
Right.
But just so we understand, that's an internal action. It could be that Mr. Carter has his phone turned off.
Oh, yeah.
Okay? So in some cases, the computer knows the phone's turned off and routes it immediately to voicemail, right?
Right, without a cell tower connection being there, and then that's when you're going to see a numeric-only landline trunk.
Okay. And so let's talk about that for a moment. Sir, you'd agree with me that as it relates to U.S. Cellular records, Sector 0 doesn't exist.
To the best of my memory, right, Sector 0 doesn't exist.
And just so the jury's on the same page with us, when we talk about towers, antennas specifically, U.S. Cellular is due north is 1, 2 to the east, 3 to the west. Depending on positioning, that will alternate and change, right?
Well, it definitely depends on positioning. Depending on the azimuth, it could be any one of those. I should point out that the 0, 1, 2 is just simply a binary numbering. Some companies will use 0, 1, 2. In this case, U.S. Cellular calls it 1, 2, 3. Somebody could call it ABC.
Right,
We don't really care.
Let's focus on U.S. Cellular because
Yeah.
that's what the record.
Yeah, 1, 2, and 3 for all the cell towers that are at issue here.
Okay. So when the jury, if they so desire, they would have the opportunity to look at these call data records that we've been looking at today. And we would see that when Mr. Carter has just simply a voicemail check, in a lot of those cases, it's going to a terminating with a 0, 0180, right?
That, I believe, is what U.S. Cellular has explained to me as a landline trunk. So what happens is the call is routed by the network to a landline trunk. So it is not actually a cell tower at that point.
Right, because it's going to voicemail.
And I have not reflected, for example, the 180s, the 181s, the 179s. Those are not cognizable towers that can be put on a map. They're landline trunks.
Right, but you have chosen to put them on your map and give a cell tower on the front end.
Right, absolutely. So in this case, for example, if we were to look at...
And that's because based on your experience, you think that's the right thing to do, right?
Not in my experience. It's based on a combination of my experience in reading call data records in combination with relying on information by the carrier as to what these entries mean and whether or not that cell tower that appears there, that connection, is valid, or whether it should be disregarded as your expert has suggested.
So, and in addition, we have this tower way up here north of Des Moines by Ankeny, right?
Are you still focused on Exhibit Q, sir?
No, I'm back to P. And
Okay.
doesn't that show us the very reason why we don't map voicemail calls? Because according to U.S. Cellular, at 12:56 in the afternoon, he's calling his own phone and he's bouncing off an Ankeny tower.
No, I don't think that establishes that at all. I don't know where the defendant was at 12:56. I assume perhaps you do. But I don't know where he was. But according to U.S. Cellular, the fact that this cell tower was logged as a communication by the phone to a tower for the purposes of handling the communication, it's valid. Otherwise, we would have to presume it's simply some arbitrary and capricious number it just randomly picks out of a database and throws into this field that's supposed to denote a cell tower, and that seems unlikely to me. So I have a choice between choosing, is it arbitrary and capricious and random, or do I rely on a representative from U.S. Cellular that this is a valid entry for a cell tower and should not be disregarded? And I chose the latter. It was a judgment call.
I'm just curious, what did the defense have to pay you to get you to provide these types of records?
Objection.
Overruled.
The defense pays me $300 an hour for expert consulting, and the defense pays $150 an hour, which is a half rate of that, for these demonstrative exhibits to be prepared by my assistant.
And then you're up over 40 hours before you got here, right?
I have no idea. I've been too busy working. I got called in on this case at the 11th hour, and I've been too busy working to be examining phone records. I haven't even cashed a retainer check yet. I've been working nonstop on this case for 2 weeks, staying up till 5:30 in the morning at times, looking through thousands and thousands of rows of data.
And just lastly, sir, as you were asking, Mr. Olson admitted the cell tower dump. Do you recall that?
I think it was the large, voluminous binder he handed me.
Okay. And the judge actually asked for clarification of what it was, but just so the jury understands, this is only the tower dump for Alpha 5 tower, right? Off the Johnson switch, that's what the very top line says.
Yeah, I've got it here. Okay, thanks. That's right, and there are many switches, and oddly, you'll see at the top of the record also it says switch NTI, and I don't know what that means. So I had a limited amount of time on my, 4 or 5 calls to U.S. Cellular, and I had to be very genteel about how many questions I asked and whether or not I annoyed the people answering the phone with my questions. So, for example, this switch NTI, no idea what it was. It wasn't a priority to ask for that one.
And so as it relates to Exhibit U, I believe, Your Honor, this is Exhibit U.
This is Exhibit U. The witness has it labeled a different number. Letter.
Your Honor, would you be so kind as to tell me what has just the B32 and Alpha 03?
That is Exhibit T.
Thank you, Judge.
This one?
Yes, sir. And just so we understand, I think you were asked some questions about why Bill Carter's phone number of 891-3073 may not show up in that tower dump. It's because he's not on that tower, right?
Actually, I don't know. It looks that way, but Bill Carter's phone or his mobile device was not the focus. That's not what I was retained to look at. I did prepare one demonstrative based on what we believe are bona fide call data records, but I did not concern myself with where was he on the farm, was he here, was he there. So the fact that he didn't appear in that massive dump that Jason Carter's communications did appear in was of no consequence. Whether that wasn't relevant to what
Right, I just want to make sure, because
Yeah.
you talked about it on your direct examination.
Right.
And so then on this second phone call, which you have bouncing off A3, again, we're going to have to leave it up to the jury of whether or not they trust Mr. Valencius or you regarding whether or not you plot a voicemail call, because that's what that middle call is, right?
Mr. Bo, can you show me which exhibit you're looking at? I apologize. Is it,
I've been told it's been admitted as T as in Tango. I believe you told us it was you.
okay, this one here? All right, so sorry.
Just clarifying,
Yeah.
this call that you have bouncing off Alpha 03, that's Bill Carter and a call going to voicemail, right?
I need to look at the call detail records to confirm if that's what I think that is. Stand by, please.
Sir, that's showing that his number is calling his number, isn't it?
Stand by, Mr. Bo. I still haven't found the file yet. That I need to
You
look
can't
at.
tell that by looking at the document you created for the jury?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question again, Mr. Bull?
Sir, the middle phone call,
Yes.
that is representing that Bill Carter called Bill Carter's own number. Outgoing to his number.
It looks that way, but I want to confirm that. Since you
please
have,
do. Take your time.
since you've identified some mistakes, I want to make sure by looking at the call detail records before I go on record verbally as saying that that's what this is. And yes, that is, you're correct, Mr. Bull, that does appear to be Bill Carter calling himself on his Motorola flip phone. Shows as a mobile to landline, handled by tower A3, rediverted to a landline trunk 181 on the Johnson switch, Right.
Now, sir, you didn't mention it on your direct examination, but the exhibit offered talks about Celebrite data being recorded, right?
Your Honor, I would actually object this would be on scope. The counselor just admitted that it wasn't discussed in direct examination.
Offered in the exhibit with a star.
I think that this is legitimate cross-examination. Mr. Bull, are you close?
Yes.
Should we continue or take our break?
Let's take our break, Your Honor. We're switching to a new category.
Okay. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to take our noon recess. Please keep in mind the admonition I've previously given you. Keep an open mind. You've not yet heard all of the testimony. Please do not discuss the case among yourselves or with anyone. Don't allow yourself to be exposed to any media reports related to this case. We will see you back here at 1:30.